July 16, 1969. Kennedy Space Center, Florida. 500,000 people line the roads. The world holds its breath. And standing in the VIP viewing area, shaking hands with senators and generals, is a tall, charming German-American in a crisp suit. His name is Wernher von Braun, and in a few hours, the rocket he built will carry 3 Americans to the moon. The crowd loves him. NASA calls him a genius. He is, by every measure, one of America's greatest heroes. But 25 years earlier, this same man stood in a different uniform, the black uniform of the SS. He held the rank of Sturmbannführer in Himmler's feared paramilitary organization. He was a card-carrying member of the Nazi Party. And the rocket that will carry Apollo 11 to the moon was perfected in a factory built underground by concentration camp slaves. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is the story of Operation Paperclip, the secret program that brought Nazi war criminals into the heart of America. To understand how we got here, we have to go back to a forest on the Baltic coast of Germany, to a place called Peenemünde. It is 1942. The war is not going well for Hitler. His armies are stalled in Russia. The Luftwaffe has failed to break Britain. He needs a miracle weapon. And Wernher von Braun, a brilliant 30-year-old aerospace engineer, is about to give him one. The V-2 was the world's first ballistic missile. It flew faster than the speed of sound. You couldn't see it coming. You couldn't hear it until after it had already destroyed the building next to you. By September 1944, the V-2s were raining down on London, Antwerp, and Paris. Over 3,000 were launched. Nearly 9,000 civilians were killed. But here is the detail that history books quietly omit. More people died building the V-2 than were ever killed by it. The rockets were built in an underground factory called Mittelwerk, carved into the Harz Mountains by prisoners from the Dora concentration camp. Over 60,000 slaves were worked to death in those tunnels, starved, beaten, hanged from the factory cranes as a warning to others. When they were too weak to work, they were shipped to Bergen-Belsen to die. Von Braun visited Mittelwerk. He selected prisoners to work on his rocket components. He knew exactly what was happening in those tunnels. He said nothing. He built his rockets, and then the war ended. By early 1945, it is clear Germany is finished. But in Washington and Moscow, a different race has already begun. Not a race for territory, a race for brains. Both the Americans and the Soviets understood a terrifying truth. Whoever captured Germany's top scientists would dominate the next 50 years of warfare. Von Braun understood this too. Facing the approaching Red Army, he gathered his team and made a calculated decision. They would surrender, but only to the Americans. "We despise the French," he reportedly told his colleagues. "We are afraid of the Soviets. We do not believe the British can afford us. So that leaves the Americans." The team packed up their research and fled south. They weren't just running from the war, they were running for their future. They were closely guarded by the SS, who had orders to execute the entire team if they were in danger of being captured by the enemy. They hid in a resort hotel near the Austrian border, waiting for the right moment to make their move. On May 2, 1945, the day after Hitler's death was announced, von Braun sent his younger brother Magnus on a desperate mission. Magnus spoke broken English. His task was simple: find the Americans and tell them the rocket team wanted to surrender. He eventually encountered Private First Class Fred Schneikert of the U.S. 44th Infantry Division. "My brother invented the V-2, he announced. "We want to surrender." Initially skeptical, the Americans soon realized the significance of the catch. By that afternoon, the arrangements were made. Over 100 of Germany's top aerospace engineers handed over in a single morning. A catch unlike anything in military history. Wernher von Braun, his arm in a cast from a recent car accident, finally met his new employers. The architects of the V-2 were now American assets. The Americans also captured 14 tons of documents and enough parts to build 100 V-2 rockets. The plunder was complete. Meanwhile, the Soviets seized Peenemünde, only to find the prize had already slipped through their fingers. The Americans had won the first round. In Washington, the military saw an opportunity, unlike anything in history. They called it Operation Paperclip. But there was a problem. These men were war criminals. To bring them to America, their records would have to be sanitized. The world was about to be sold a story of scientific genius, while the truth of the tunnels was buried in classified files. One by one, they were brought to America, given new identities on paper, set up with houses, salaries, and security clearances. The paperclip in each scientist's file, used to attach the new documents to the old ones, gave the operation its name. The Cold War arms race was now being fueled on both sides by the ruins of the Third Reich. Von Braun was no longer an enemy. He was an American hero, the man who would take us to the stars. The race for brains had been won, but at what cost to history? There was just one problem. President Truman had explicitly ordered that no ardent Nazis or war criminals were to be allowed into the United States. But Wernher von Braun was SS. Arthur Rudolph had overseen slave labor. Hubertus Strughold had conducted horrific human experiments. These were not just participants, they were war criminals. So the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency did something breathtaking in its audacity. They rewrote the files. Von Braun's SS membership was removed. His connection to the tunnels was buried. New files described him simply as a political opportunist with no real ties to Nazism. The same was done for over 1,600 scientists, engineers, and technicians. Valuable assets that the Army refused to leave for the Soviets. State Department officials raised objections, but they were overruled. These men were simply too valuable to leave behind. One by one, they were brought to America, given new identities on paper, set up with houses, salaries, and security clearances. The paperclip in each scientist's file, used to attach the new documents to the old ones, gave the operation its name, Operation Paperclip. The scientists were first stationed at Fort Bliss, Texas, and White Sands, New Mexico. Von Braun and his team spent years there, rebuilding their rocket program under American supervision. The irony was almost surreal. The same men who had built weapons to kill Allied soldiers were now living in American Army housing, eating in American Army mess halls, being paid by the American taxpayer. Their neighbors had no idea who they were. To the outside world, they were just another group of engineers working for the government. Meanwhile, the Soviets were running their own version of the program, Operation WWII, grabbing thousands of lower-level German technicians and shipping them east. The Cold War arms race was now being fueled, on both sides, by the same source, the ruins of the Third Reich. Back in America, von Braun was transferred to Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama, which the locals soon nicknamed Rocket City. He became a celebrity. He appeared on Disney television specials about the future of space travel. He became the public face of America's space dream. Nobody asked where the dream had come from. Nobody mentioned the tunnels. On July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong stepped onto the surface of the moon, a giant leap for mankind. The Saturn V rocket that got him there was the greatest feat of engineering in human history. It stood 363 feet tall. It produced 7.6 million pounds of thrust at launch, a machine of pure, unadulterated power. It was Wernher von Braun's masterpiece, the culmination of a lifetime of obsession with the stars. In the mission control room in Houston, grown men wept. It was the greatest moment of the Cold War. It was proof that American ingenuity and democratic values had triumphed over Soviet communism. But the man who made it possible was a former SS officer. The shadow was never far away. The factory that perfected his rocket technology had been built on mass murder, a truth buried for decades, and the American government had spent 2 decades making sure nobody would ever connect those two facts. But in 1984, the silence was finally broken. Arthur Rudolph, the project manager for the Saturn V, was confronted. He was quietly stripped of his American citizenship and deported to West Germany for his role in the slave labor program. Von Braun himself had died in 1977. He was never charged with any crime. His legacy remained intact. Today, his statue stands outside the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, a hero to some, a shadow to others. Nobody mentioned the tunnels. The space dream was worth more than the truth.
History rarely gives us clean heroes. Operation Paperclip forces us to ask a question that has no comfortable answer. If the outcome is great enough, does it justify the crime that made it possible? The moon landing genuinely changed humanity. It gave us satellite technology, medical imaging, and water purification systems. And it gave us the integrated circuits that power every device you own. And it was built in part by men who watched human beings die in underground tunnels and said nothing. The United States government made a calculated, deliberate choice. They decided that winning the Cold War and reaching the moon was worth sanitizing the records of war criminals, worth lying to the president, worth betraying the survivors of the camps. They claimed to have liberated. Whether that bargain was justified is a question historians are still arguing about today. What is not debatable is this: it happened. It was hidden. And for decades, the men who built the American space program were celebrated without the full truth of who they were. The 60,000 who died in the tunnels of Dora never got a statue. They never got an apology. They got a footnote. History, as always, is written by the winners. But sometimes, if you look hard enough, the shadows tell a different story. This has been Wyrdova. Thank you for watching.